The Illuminate Arts and Faith Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee wants to help you find your tribe. Do you get way too excited about quoting Wendell Berry or C.S. Lewis in conversations with coworkers? Does your Spotify playlist include hymns, a little jazz, and a whole lot of Andrew Peterson? Join your tribe at Illuminate March 31 and April 1 for education and inspiration from speakers Russ Ramsey, Douglas McKelvey, John Hendricks, and others. Find a complete list of session topics and ticket information at southern.edu/illuminate.
In 2024, I set out to meet as many poets as I could and spend an hour with each one. I got more than I bargained for, more insight, more clarity, more hope. It's proved to be one of the richest highlights of my life. 17 writers, 17 deeply human conversations that made me sit up and pay attention. Franz Kafka once said, if the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. And that's what I hope this new book will do. I hope it wakes us up, my friends. I hope these conversations will be the catalyst for something to be reawakened, re-enchanted, and reinvigorated. It's called An Axe for the Frozen Sea, Conversations with Poets About What Matters Most. I'm Ben Palpin, and I hope you'll come and listen in as I spend a little time with poets like Lucy Shaw, Malcolm Guite, Dana Gioia, and Lee Young Lee. Pull up a chair at the table as we dig into what it means to write well and to live well. An Axe for the Frozen Sea is now available from Rabbit Room Press. Visit the store at rabbitroom.com, or better yet, ask about it at your favorite bookseller.
What if someday, long after you're gone, your child's encountering something you can't even foresee, and for them to have all those lost moments tucked into their soul, and to have watched what happens again and again and again, watch truth win again and again, watch a story end with hope again and again, because that is the truth. The truth is we are people of hope, and so we need to be told the truth again and again and again for us to really believe it.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. As host of the Read Aloud Revival podcast and the Read Aloud Revival online community, Sarah MacKenzie has brought untold joy to bookish families. Besides connecting families with other people's books, Sarah has started writing and publishing her own picture books. Her latest is Because Barbara Cooney Paints Her World. Illustrated by Eileen Ryan Ewan, this picture book biography tells the story of one of America's best loved and most celebrated children's book illustrators. Because Barbara is available for pre-order. If you order by June 18th, you can get free bonuses, including a family book club guide, audiobook, video book, and an invitation to a Zoom book party picnic with the author and the illustrator. Follow the link in the episode description to find out how to get your bonuses. Sarah MacKenzie, I'm so glad to have you on the Habit Podcast. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, thanks for having me back. I always love coming.
I'm excited about your new book that, hopefully it'll be, there's some questions of when this book is coming out. I think it was originally going to be early spring.
Questions I would like answered. Believe me.
We'll adjust the release date according to the, whenever we'll release this episode when your book releases. You'll have to keep me posted on that. But it's a book about the illustrator Barbara Cooney.
Yes.
Which I didn't, of course I know lots of Barbara Cooney's books, but I didn't realize she had written all those different books that I liked. I had not put it all together. So that was one of the great pleasures of reading Because Barbara, your picture book.
Barbara, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Tell me probably a lot of our listeners know who Barbara Cooney is, but for those who don't, tell us about Barbara Cooney.
Yeah, so Barbara Cooney was primarily an illustrator, although she did author several picture books too. So Miss Rumphius, I think, is the one she's most famous for, although she won awards, Caldecott Awards, in fact, for Chanticleer and the Fox, and also The Oxcart Man, which is a poem written by Donald Hall. Other ones that your listeners might be familiar with are Roxaboxen. She illustrated Roxaboxen, which is this lovely picture book about children who create like a imaginary world outside, like with sticks and rocks, like their own markets and their whole trading system. And it's the book you read to your kids when you want them to go outside and play with their imaginations. You read them Roxaboxen. And several others. I think there was something, I'm forgetting the number off the top of my head now, but I feel like it was something like 200 books that she contributed to. But she was also a mother of 4. And my very favorite children's picture book of all time is Miss Rumphius. And so that book, because I started to kind of like, who is this illustrator? And I'd read her other things and look at her other art, and then started to dig in a little bit into who she was as a person, and knew that I wanted to dive in more deeply. And so then I reached out to her son, because she's passed away now. I reached out to her son to interview. And the more I heard about her, the more I learned about her, and the more I talked to Barnaby and other people who knew her, like her editor, and the more I thought, this is a woman worth emulating or holding up as like a person that we might want to aspire to be, kind of like. Yeah.
When as I was looking at your book and understanding who Barbara Cooney was and what she had done, I thought, this makes a lot of sense that Sarah MacKenzie is interested in Barbara Cooney.
She has 4 children. She does her work right in the middle of all the chaos. I have 6 children. My life is chaos. Yeah.
One of the details I loved, Sarah, from your picture book was that Barbara Cooney set up her drawing table in the busiest room in the house, and in the picture the kids are running around and playing around her. And this relates back to what you were saying about her being such a good mother. So I'd love to hear you. I mean, talk to me about the relationship between your creative life and her life as a mother and running a very busy household, which you can relate to, I'm sure.
I can. This might be one of the reasons why I think when I realized that this is the way Barbara Cooney worked, is like in the midst of parenting 4 children. Her husband was a doctor, a medical doctor for a small town, but he was gone a lot working. And so she was doing this work while she was also raising 4 children. She also was like very artistic. She made like, Barnaby would tell me that when they would go on a picnic, like when I take my kids on a picnic, I like look to see how much prepackaged food we have in the house that I can throw in a basket so we can go there so I can get to reading. That's really the goal of the picnic, right? When Barbara Cooney took her kids on a picnic, she would make like watercress sandwiches and like these deviled eggs and these elaborate meals. And then they would get in like a boat and like go off on a bit. Like, this is like, I mean, this is like real picnicking, right? Yeah. He would say she was a picnicker. I remember the phrase he used. It was a picnicker of the first water. So he also mentioned, I can't remember now, actually, if Barnaby mentioned this to me or if I read it somewhere. Doesn't matter, that she had a quote taped up to that workstation in the middle of the house, which was by, and I'm never sure how to say this name. I know he's an Argentine short story writer. I think it might be Jorge Luis Borges or something like that. Borges. Anyway.
I say Borges, but I don't know if I'm saying it. I'm probably not
Borges.
saying it right. Anyway.
Borges sounds much more like fancy than.
Doesn't sound very Spanish though. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay, that's true. Okay, so the quote is, I have always imagined that paradise will be a kind of library. So she had this on her workstation. Well, then come to find out in my research about Barbara Cooney that one of the final things she did before she passed away is that she was living up in Damariscotta, Maine, in this old this seaside house that she had built when she was making Chanticleer and the Fox, actually. And their town library was just falling apart. It was like in an old house that was not well kept up, and she decided that. And I think it's because she had this quote like in her bones. I have always imagined that paradise will be a kind of library. Like this is not what a library should be. A library is a place where, imaginations are captured and words are sacred, kind of. Yeah. So she created an auction where she like reached out to all of her famous illustrator friends and had everybody donate these original works of art. And she auctioned them off and was able to build a new library for Damariscotta, Maine. With that success of that auction, which just feels like such a Barbara thing to do, to be like, wait, like I can imagine something more beautiful than exists right now. And there's like nothing for her to gain from that. Like there was nobody remembered that. I kind of stumbled across this information and started asking various people who were at that auction, like, what was it like? And
Well, one thing I was thinking about as I was reading through this book is this is a person who was creative in so many ways besides making art, or what we think of as, the art making is is just one slice of the pie of creativity, and it's not necessarily even the biggest slice of the pie.
Yeah.
And this was a person who, in every way, was telling a truer story, right? Who the way you just said, she saw the potential for something beautiful and made it more beautiful, whether that was her family life or the picnic that,
Yeah.
I
Or
might
the
go to.
Christmas tree. Like she made really elaborate Christmas cookies that Barnaby said they would hang on the Christmas tree, but they would spend hours making these Christmas cookies, like little works of art. And I just think to myself, I would never spend that much time on something that was so, what's the word I'm looking for?
Ephemeral might be the word.
Yes, exactly. Doesn't last. Like, no, I guess it lasts, but it did last in a way because Barnaby was telling me about them.
Yeah.
Those cookies decades later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good. Also, you mentioned that when they were building that house in Maine, she built it while she was writing her book in the construction site while the hammers were pounding and the saws were screaming.
Yeah, she actually wrote this.
Why does she? It sounds like she was seeking out chaos in which to write.
That's so interesting. I didn't actually think of it that way, but you're right. Putting your own, so I have 6 children and, but I don't put my workspace in the main room of the house.
Yes. Thank you.
I actually do.
You're not putting your podcast booth in the,
You're welcome. You're welcome. And you're right. And then after her children were grown and she went to Damerscott, Maine, she really did. And in fact, I'm sorry, it wasn't Chanticleer and the Fox. It was the Ox Cart Man.
Gotcha. Donald
Hall's poem, The Ox Cart Man, that she illustrated, won a Caldecott for. That book she made while her house was being built around her. And she described it as like the pounding of hammers and screaming of saws, I think is how she said it, going on around her. And actually the workers are, if you look at the Ox Cart Man and then you compared him, the illustration, to the 2 men who were working on her house, you will see where she got her inspiration.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So interesting. Something must have been creatively invigorating to her about making art in the midst of life.
Yeah.
That's cool. I think so often too, when we're doing artistic work, whether it's writing or art, I don't make visual art, but I know when I'm writing, I will often tell myself that I need, quiet, I need time away. And I think sometimes that's true. But I also know that Teaching from Rest, which is my first book I wrote, I really did like that one in the throes of life because our twins who are our youngest had just been born maybe 4 months before I started working on that book. And it was just my laptop was on my kitchen counter. I had a 1-year-old, twin newborns, and then 3 kids I was homeschooling who were 12, 10, and 8. And really that book was written in these 15-minute snatches in the midst of life. Now, if you asked me to do it again today, I don't think I could because I wonder if there's some sort of creative grace that's made available to you based on whatever you're in at the moment. But I don't know.
Yeah, I know. I have talked to young mothers who write before, or mothers of young children. I won't comment on the age of the mothers. They could go different ways. But anyway,
you're a wise man.
But that idea of there being some grace for the situation, it's almost like that. It's that limitation when they only have 15-minute snatches.
Yeah,
that somehow makes them take those 15 minutes more seriously than I've ever taken any 15 minutes.
Totally. I think I was just telling my oldest daughter about this yesterday. I really think that's true. If you don't have any limits on your time or your it's not just time. It's also brain power or technically I had time. I was at home all the time, but there's something about the limitations that I think makes those minutes matter more or something. Yeah.
That was definitely this. If you read Flannery O'Connor's letters when she talks about her process as she was dying of lupus, she had so little energy that she didn't waste it on anything but writing, and the focus with which she worked when in general she had so much less energy than you or I have. But she just stewarded that energy. It was really remarkable.
I remember some years back when our twins were younger. Now they're 10, so it's not nearly as difficult as it was when they were younger. When they were about 2 and 3, I would have this mother's helper come after high school. She'd get out of school and come over for like an hour, 2, 3, maybe a couple times a week. And I got so much done in those 2 or 3 hours. It's just nuts. And then there was a summer that she would start coming for about 5 or 6 hours a couple times a week. And I remember telling my husband, I don't think I'm getting any more done than I did when I had 2 or 3. And I think it was sort of like, well, I've got 5 or 6 hours. You kind of, stretch out into that time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Steward is the word you just used, like stewarding, Flannery O'Connor stewarding her energy.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So in the Read Aloud Revival world, the people you serve there maybe aren't exclusively mothers of young children, but I'm sure that's a huge.
Yeah, I bet most. Yeah.
From talking to them, and I'm sure a lot of them are interested in doing creative work of some kind.
Yeah.
What have you learned from them about these questions? I mean, you've already expressed some of the things you've learned, but
yeah. I mean,
what do you tell them? Either way.
That's actually one of my least favorite questions to get is like, how do you manage your creative work with your mothering? Because I think it's so tricky. I do like this idea, though, of we've been talking about this lately at Read Aloud Revival, about the idea of balance, because we hear that word so often, and about how my friend Misty will say, when you're balancing on a bike, it's not a state of being. It's like if you're balancing on a bike, what you're actually doing is constantly making tiny micro adjustments to keep yourself upright. So it's actually a state of action. It's like what you're always, if you're in balance, it means something's out of balance and you're putting it back in, right? Like that's always, or kind of a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left, a little forward. And I like that vision because I think where we get the most frustrated, and I think this is probably true for most women in our forum community who I know are trying to pursue creative pursuits alongside motherhood, is that we get into trouble when we envision balance as being a state that we're going to achieve. Like when I'm in balance, it means everything feels right, when actually that's the opposite of what balance is. It's really a verb. It's like it means something's out of balance and you're putting it back in. That feels to me very energizing and life-giving. And I think someone like Barbara Cooney, actually her life really shows this. I would bet that most of the time she didn't feel perfectly balanced in mothering or in her creative work. And yet now that she is passed, her children remember her so fondly. Her work is continuing to meet young readers, and inspire the imaginations of young people and capture the imaginations of old people like me, like it's so it feels balanced to me on my side because I wasn't but I bet it doesn't ever feel that way in the moment. I know that we've got some writers at Read Aloud Revival that's the constant question is like, how do I do this without feeling guilty about one thing or the other? I don't know if maybe we're not supposed to do it without, that sort of unease. Maybe that uneasiness is part of what makes creativity work. I don't know.
But I also think it's important to frame it as uneasiness and not as guilt. And it's so easy to think, if I'm feeling unease, this must be guilt.
Yeah, that's right. If I feel uneasy, something's wrong. I'm doing it wrong. So I feel guilty that like, yes, you're right. Instead of going, well, discomfort is part of the creative process. So I'm always uncomfortable with something. That's part of like life is. Yeah. So yeah, I think you're right. Framing it as unease instead of guilt. That's critical. Yeah. And I bet that would actually go a long way toward us feeling like, oh, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And it feels uncomfortable because it's supposed to feel uncomfortable. Our hearts are restless till they rest in thee. Right. Like that whole. Yeah. Yeah.
And if the living room doesn't get vacuumed, maybe we don't have to feel guilt about that.
Maybe we don't have to feel guilty about that. Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, it needs to be vacuumed. Sure. It's not getting vacuumed right now. And that doesn't have to be, now suddenly there's something wrong with me.
Well, that's so true. So we see things that are undone, whether it's the floor not being vacuumed or the pile of laundry. I mean, I think for years, my kids actually, and my husband, just collected their clean clothes out of the big heap of clean laundry in the living room that I was always like, today I am going to fold that and put it away, but I never did. So people just came and got, and nobody walked around naked. Like, it worked.
And if they wanted folded clothes, anybody can fold these clothes whenever they want
That's
to.
right. But you could grab theirs and fold them and put them away. Nobody did. Shocking.
Yeah. So,
yeah, but we see those undone things and see them as as like proof that we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. But it's just interesting. It's like, why do we feel guilty about that? Doesn't it just mean that there are humans here that wear things and they get dirty and like life is happening? Maybe if we saw that instead as evidence that life is happening instead of evidence that we can't keep up,
Yeah. Where there is no oxen, the manger is clean.
That's right. That's right. Yep.
All right. I'm not even sure that's what that proverb is supposed to mean.
I don't know, but I love it. I'm totally going to think of this every time I hear it now.
Yeah. Okay. Waxwing Books. You have launched, you're now a publisher. The first Waxwing Books came out, was it last year or was it before that?
Yeah, it was in 2023. Yeah. We launched our first one on Kickstarter in 2022, but it released in 2023.
Yeah.
That was a little more beautiful. My picture book illustrated by Breezy Berkshire. And then our second.
Featuring a character named Lou Alice.
Yes, featuring the main character is Lou Alice. Yes, indeed, which I was inspired by, I think subconsciously. I think it was so funny when we realized, I definitely stole that name from Jonathan Rogers' wife, who is just the most wonderful person. So
I think so too.
I'm sure you do.
Anyway, I'm sorry. We moving on.
Yes. While Everyone is Sleeping is another picture book. That one illustrated by Gabrielle Grimard. That one came out in the fall of 23. And then we have in the pipeline, we've got about 3 books a year coming out through 2025 at the moment. Maybe a few more on the horizon that we've got an eye on. And the first few have been picture books that I wrote and were illustrated by different illustrators. We really did want to launch the publishing house with my books for a couple reasons. One is so we could make all the mistakes on my books and not feel too terribly guilty about it. Because we knew, whenever you're trying to do something new and you don't know how to do it, you're going to mess up a whole bunch. And we have. So that's been helpful. But then also, I wasn't, honestly, I was telling you this before we started recording, I wasn't sure what I would think about the role of publisher. Like, I've been an author, I've been a podcaster, I've been a speaker. I've never been on the publisher side of things. And I just wasn't, I am every bit as excited about, we have several books now lined up that are authored and illustrated by others. And I'm just as excited about making those books. I mean, all of the creative processes from editorial to art design and that whole the actual making a really beautiful product that's really lovely to hold in your hands. That has been really fun to be oh, I kind of think I was made to do this. This is really fun. I really love it. It's really hard. I'm making mistakes left and right, but it's also I think we're figuring it out. I think we're getting there. So we've got several books coming out. So far, picture books. We have one novel in the works and we'd like to do more. Really, our focus at Waxwing is not so much on picture books or middle grade, but on read alouds. So on stories that are really good to be shared with multi-generations, families reading aloud together. That's sort of our focus. So whether that is a picture book that appeals to a wide group of range of ages or a middle grade novel that appeals to a wide range of ages, that's sort of where our heart is for read alouds, shared stories.
You are not tired of talking about read alouds?
No, you know what's so funny? I thought for sure I would get tired of talking about read alouds. I'm not even close. Not even close.
Well, it's been a while since you've given the pitch for how great read alouds are on the Habit podcast. So why are read alouds important to you, Sarah?
Oh, gosh. Okay. Well, aside from, and I'll skip over this part really quickly because I think a lot of people know this now. And much thanks to Jim Trelease for all of his work on the Read Aloud Handbook, making this much more widespread knowledge that read alouds are so good. They're the number one thing we can do to help our kids succeed academically. Whether they're being read aloud to at the age of 4 or 14, they still have the most profound impact on language learning, writing, speaking, and thinking. Aside from that, which is a huge thing, for me, the real draw to a read aloud is just how much it connects us. In 15 minutes for free by pulling a book off the shelf. And really the only energy I have to bring to it is reading the words out loud. We are instantly transported together me and the 16-year-old son that I was just squabbling with about his phone use, and the 10-year-old and the 4-year-old who is pitching a fit, all of us are instantly transported into Narnia, and we're all rooting for the same characters, and we're worried about the same things. We're on the same, we're like, it's like it connects us, reminds us that we're all on the same team. It really, I think, gives us this opportunity to walk a mile in the shoes of another. So we're growing. We know this, that stories help grow compassion and empathy in readers. So we're giving them this opportunity to grow in those areas while they're also like bearing witness to characters overcoming obstacles again and again and again. I just don't know another way to do that in 15 minutes for free. It's just kind of unbelievable. So I think I'm astonished. Every time I say it, I get astonished again. Like, it's kind of amazing how much a read aloud can do in 15 minutes. And so I get a little zealous about it because it's so fun. I mean, not always. It's not always fun, but there are different times in family life where you either have, toddlers throwing a fit, or you're falling asleep while you're reading aloud, or you're reading a book that's a real dud.
That's right. You're in the middle of one of those forests in Lord of the Rings. Like, oh, you got to be kidding me.
Are we serious? Are we doing this again?
Or one of the debates.
The Little House on the Prairie books are just absolute favorites of mine. I love the audiobooks, especially. They're narrated by Terry Jones. They're so magnificent. I cannot read those books aloud to save my life. I feel like we're Noah building the ark again, when it's like, and then Pa took a board that was this long, and I'm like, really don't need all this detail, Laura. We just
yeah. Hey, we're recording this in mid-January, so hot off Christmas. When all 6 of my kids, who range in age from 28 to 19, came home they were home for Christmas Eve.
A house full of adults. That's a different thing, isn't it?
And we thought, it'd be fun. Let's pull out the Advent book that has the doors you open, and for years they all fought over whose turn it was to do which door or whatever. And these people who are like I said, the youngest one is 19, the oldest is 28. And we pulled this thing, and it was like you talk about being transported. We were transported back in time. Everybody knew the inside jokes that we had for every door and all the hand motions. And it was just so fun to sort of do a little read aloud with that crowd.
That's so fun. One of my favorite things, because our 6 are kind of spread out. So our oldest are 22, 20, and 18, and our youngest are 11, and then we have 10-year-old twins. So when our younger ones were like 5 or 6, I'd be sitting there reading a picture book with them, and then all of a sudden over my shoulder, I see like the 15-year-old is like creeping up, and then kind of just sits on the back of the couch. Or I'll be like, do you want to read this one? And one of them will go, that was my favorite book when I was younger. I got to come sit and look at the pictures. It does that. Yeah. There's like a shared connection that you have over that Advent book that,
I assume you use the language of family cultural. It's such a culture building.
Yeah. It really is. And it's in a similar way. I think sometimes it's easy to understand it if you're coming in to read aloud. It's like, well, I didn't have that maybe growing up, and maybe we haven't done that ourselves. It's similar to when you watch a movie and everybody is like making jokes or saying quotes from it afterward. But there's something else that's at play. And I don't know exactly what it is that's different, because of course a movie is like a story in just another form. But there's something about the shared language of it, or maybe it's the time that it takes that you're in the world, because you can watch The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in a couple of hours, but if to read it aloud together is longer. But there's something about, like, I don't know, painting that world in your own imagination while you're sharing the same experience with somebody else. I don't know exactly why it's different, but it feels like that, but better. It feels like that, but like amped up or deepened or something.
Yeah. Sarah, I know one of the things you like to talk about is the power of story to strengthen kids' souls. What do you mean by that? A strengthened soul, what does that even mean?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me is just the fact that we as parents, especially, I feel like we want to make sure we give our kids everything they need to succeed. We don't know what that is. And it's different for all of our kids, and we have no idea what's coming. I mean, if we think about ourselves, like our parents couldn't have known all the things that we were going to face this week, let alone, over our lifetime, right? Yeah. So as a parent, my question of like, how do I do that then? How do I pour into my kids in a way that they can carry with them what they need, even if I don't know what that is? And I think maybe one of the better things we can give our kids is, well, two things. One is that ability, like I kind of mentioned this earlier, when we're reading any story, we are watching a character overcome obstacles, because every story has a character who has to overcome something. And so just bearing witness to that again and again and again means that when our kids then encounter obstacles in their future, it's not like they're going to go, oh, that's right, I remember how Bilbo Baggins handled this. That's not what I mean. That's like much too simplified. But they have it like in their bones, like this ability for humans to overcome hardship and face difficult things that feel insurmountable. That kind of soul building. Also, though, I know, like, speaking as a mother, like when I read Little Women, let's say, and I read it very differently as a 20-year-old than I do as a 43-year-old, and I read Marmee differently. And I'm like, woo, inspired in a different way, and also can notice truth in a different way than I did at different stages of life. I have a conversation later today with Jennifer Pepito. She wrote the book called Mothering by the Book, which is, I actually have it right here. Let me see what the subtitle is. The Power of Reading Aloud to Overcome Fear and Recapture Joy. The whole book is really about how fiction has been a better parenting tool for her than parenting books. You go to parenting books because you're like, I want to know how to handle this situation. But actually reading something like Little House on the Prairie or Little Britches, or, you get inspired. It's like, it's kind of the same way you would by meeting somebody who has, who you're like, I want to be kind of like them. Like for me, I can see that in some of the older women in my church, for example, like, oh, I want to be more like that. And then just kind of trying to figure out, what did they do? Why are they, how would Sally handle this moment right now? This hard parenting moment feels different than what did the parenting book say? So I guess that kind of soul feeding feels deeper and richer to me.
Yeah. I love that insight that it's not that we're hoping our kids will remember how Bilbo solved a particular problem. But I mean, you're talking about the leaf mold of the mind,
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Where the stories go in and they get mixed up and they decompose, and you don't know where an idea or an insight or a bit of wisdom came from. And it doesn't matter. So good. And there's also it's a safer place. It's a safer environment in which to meet a Long John Silver, or
that's right. Yes.
Or whatever the dangerous person who you need to watch out for.
Yep. It's a safer way to handle. I mean, a lot of times there's so many things, like we know we should talk to our kids about things that are happening in the world, but that feels really hard. But it's easier to maybe approach some of those difficult topics through a story. It feels safer. It is actually safer.
It's literally safer.
Yeah, it's literally safer. Also, I was just thinking as you were saying that, I was thinking about how one of my twins, so we're kind of story structure nerds around here. So, and my twins will oftentimes like come to me like 3/4 of the way through a book sobbing, like I cannot believe it. And I've finally taught them, 3/4 of the way through a fiction story is the all is lost moment. Let's talk about what that means. What did that hero want more than anything? What are they afraid of more than anything? We know it's coming at that 3/4 mark. So that has helped them get through some more difficult stories, because if that's part of how the character becomes what they need to become, it just feels a little bit like, So anyway, we're playing a board game the other day. My son is losing to me just huge. I mean, it was like massive loss. And he tells me, I am. This is a regular routine in my house. I feel like playing Scrabble with me is a character building for everybody else. And it's like, and then I need to do some character building afterward with all the bragging that I do during that game. But it wasn't Scrabble we were playing. But still, he got to this moment. He looked up at me and he goes, "This is my all is lost moment." And I just started laughing. I thought it was so funny. That's like a little tiny application. But really, what if someday, long after you're gone, your child's encountering something you can't even foresee, and for them to have all of those all is lost moments tucked into their soul, and to have watched what happens again and again and again, watch truth win again and again, watch a story end with hope again and again, because that is the truth. The truth is we are people of hope, and so we need to be told the truth again and again and again for us to really believe it.
Yeah, so good. All right. I typically end with the question. I hope you're ready for it. Who are the writers that make you want to write?
I feel like this changes so often for me.
Yeah, no, that's why I don't mind asking people again after they've been on my podcast before.
Okay, so this is a new answer. What's funny is when I read her book, I'm gonna make sure I got her name right real quick. When I read her collection of essays, 2 collections of her essays, last year, I thought of your question. I thought this is somebody who makes me want to write. This is totally different. This is not picture book or fiction. It's totally different. She writes nonfiction essay collections. Her name is Mary Laura Philpott.
Oh, yeah, a Nashville person.
Oh, okay. Yes.
She was one of my first podcast guests.
Wait, really?
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh. I don't know how I missed that one.
In 2018 or whenever this podcast,
Wild.
19. Yeah.
Oh man. Her writing makes me want to write. So I Miss You When I Blink was, I think, the first essay collection. Bomb Shelter. I read them out of order. It did not matter. But I read them on my Kindle, I think. I went and bought the physical books so that I could be like, wait, how is she doing this? I did that total nerdy thing where you're like, I'm going to deconstruct this essay. Because I don't know how she's doing it, but I want to write like nothing else after I read her. So she's the first person that comes to mind for me.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, good. Okay. Sarah MacKenzie, it's always such a pleasure. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me back. I always love to come chat.
I hope we can talk again soon.
Yeah, we will.
The Habit Podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. You can support their work, including this podcast, by becoming a member. Visit rabbitroom.com/membership. Special thanks as well to Taylor Leonard for letting us use her song Diamonds as the theme music for the Habit Podcast. You can learn more about Taylor and follow her work at taylorleonard.com. The Habit Membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.